The unknown says, our confidence is naive. Compromise. Stick to the tried and tested. Your passion is aggressive, knowing that we are coming for everything, marching forwards in numbers, in ones and zeros. The past has no leverage on us. The present expected us to stand still, but time ticked our presence, with the future inscribing us into history's foundation, calling us by our names, including the clicks in our names and clicking of our fingers. Once not born with silver spoons in their mouths, are now makers of the spoon and benders thereof, came to this earth with answers clenched in fist, unclenching fist to be the answer. Ours is not a race to come first or be first, but to influence and impact us, energy injectors, conductors of creativity, dancers with the rain, proverbs for our posterity, signaling the speed of ideas, implanting innovation, setting standards a tradition. We are outliers, the avant-garde, belonging to secrets whispered in spaces unseen for fear of our splendor. We are resolutely spewing out stagnation, a slow poison for the norm, perplexing conformity. We're not taking up space only to be muted at the table, not just conduits between what should be and is, not just bodies treading into uncharted public realms, but we are tomorrow's tools, the manifestation of ideals unscripted, leaning on the reassurance of the rising of the sun the next day. Let he without foresight cast the first doubt, whilst we visionaries converge at Urban Festival 2020. Welcome.
Morning, everybody, and good afternoon, and welcome to my IUDF session number 2. This is the second session of a 5-part series of conversations we'll be having this month at the Urban Festival 2020. Thank you very much for everybody who joined this particular session. My name is Oliver Dixon, moderator for this particular session. I hope that we can have a great deal of fun. We had a great deal of fun last week in the first My IUDF session, where we spoke to a group of storytellers. We spoke to the poem you just heard by a poet named Emma. We also had a brief conversation with Emma last week. She is what I call the soundtrack to our month of urban conversations about the urban space, conversations about empowering the civic. And that is the title for the theme for Urban Fest 2020, Empowering the Civic. Thank you very much once again to Emma for that beautiful poem. Last week we had a different poem. This week we have the one you just heard, and next week we will have another poem by Emma that sticks to the theme, but expands on the conversations that we have here and forms the soundtrack to the sessions that we have across each week. In today's session, we're going to be having a great conversation and a great input by Dr. Kira, and we're going to be having a panel discussion a little later on after that. And towards the end of the session, we're going to speak to visual artist Nindya, who will throughout the session listen to the conversations that you and I will be having, and she will be taking it and turning it into art. A great way to capture the rich, beautiful, and textured conversations we will be having here. And as they say, picture speaks 1,000 words. And so the thousands of words you and I will be speaking here today will be turned into art that will memorialize the conversations that we have here today. But before we get the ball rolling on any of the conversations we have here today, I want to give you an introduction to some of the engagement platforms we have here. We have a Q&A and a chat box available in this Zoom link, which you can drop questions and comments throughout the session, and we do encourage you to ask questions and have comments. But if you are on social media throughout the session, it is at SA Cities Network. That is the Twitter handle which you can tag us at, or you can simply use the hashtag UrbanFest2020. And if you feel like a global citizen today, which we all are, we're part of a global movement of urban conversations. And as you know, the month of October is Urban Month across the globe. And so you can use the hashtag Urban October. Hashtag Urban October. On Facebook, you can find us at Urban Festival 2020 should you want to tag us in any posts. What I also encourage you to do is take a photo of your screen if you're able to, and post it on Twitter. So, you know, those who are missing out can see what they're missing out on. But before we jump into it, what is the IUDF? What does it aim to do? And what part will you and I, as change agents and potential change agents, play in it? Now, the IUDF is government's framework. It's a policy framework document that outlines what the goals are as far as urban change is considered, and what the levers are that what those levers are that will enable us to implement the change and the programs that we aim to achieve towards the goals that we've set for ourselves. The IUDF framework is part of a broader document in South Africa that we call the National Development Plan. As you would know, the National Development Plan was a document put together by some of the brightest minds in South Africa years ago, chaired obviously by who was then the minister in the presidency, Trevor Manuel. And this document took a while to put together, drew from various thought leaders in society, various change agents like yourself today, and the IUDF framework was a part of that particular document. And this is why this document is important to us. Now, it's made up of 9 particular levers. Today, we're going to have a look at lever number 7. And the good team at SA Cities Network had put together a video for us to take a look at that explains lever 7. And that is, and if you have any questions about it, do type those questions out for us, either on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or in the comment section below. I'm going to ask Sean to play the video for us. Look at it, and then we will start the rest of the session right after that. Sean, over to you.
Lever 7. Empowered active communities. Cities cannot succeed without the energy and investment of its citizens. The very power of cities stems from their unique capacity to bring people of diverse social and cultural backgrounds together. Empowered and active communities enable cities to succeed and transform the quality of urban life and result in socially integrated, stable, safe and just societies where all human rights are protected and each individual's dignity is respected.
Now, last week in the first IUDF session, we also had a video that does various translations, but broadly gives an in-depth explanation through a practical example and case study of what the IUDF as a framework aims to achieve. And this particular video was an explainer of what lever 7 does in part of that. If you'd like to have a look at the video, and I do encourage you to go check it out, that explains the IUDF more broadly, do head on over to the social media platforms, or in the chat box right now, you will find the link to that video. Don't watch it now, watch it after the session. We still need you here, and you can have a look at it. And if you have any questions about it, do let us know and continue the conversation beyond what we will spend together here in this particular session. And now I want to introduce to you Dr. Kira Owen, a sociologist, has a PhD in Cambridge and also is an alum of UKZN. So identities and is a word that is a little new to me. So I'm going to ask Dr. Kira to also just explain that a little bit for us. But Dr. Kira Owen, welcome to session number 2 of my IUDF. How are you doing?
Hi, Oliver. Thanks very much. I'm good and lovely to be here with everyone today. Sorry, your sound broke up a tiny bit, so I wasn't sure what the word was that you wanted me to explain.
Oh, no problem. I'll repeat that. But maybe answer this question for me before we get into the session. What's your day-to-day activity as far as your job is concerned? Sociology sounds like a really fancy sort of thinking process. Do you wake up and think, or is there a part of your job that's really interactive that requires you to get your hands dirty on the ground? What do you do on a day-to-day as an academic and as a sociologist?
Yeah, I hope I do get up and think. I'm sure most people do. It's actually not that much different, I would say, to many other jobs. And sociologists practice in many different ways. So what I'll show you today is a particular type of sociology, which is called public sociology. It attempts to engage through participatory action research. In other words, it's not very interested in sitting within the walls of academia. Is interested in getting engaged and involved to try and act for change.
Now, you've put together for us a talk that speaks about the empowerment of stories and how the power of stories as a tool can empower communities, can empower the civic, and really get people activated towards participation within the civic, within communities, and how they shape their urban spaces. I'm going to hand over to you, and thank you so much once again for joining us.
Thanks, Oliver. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, yes, so as Oliver said, I'm particularly interested in understanding how storytelling, a particular type of storytelling, might be useful in the city. And this is a storytelling with political intent. And so Ben Okri, if you haven't read him, is worth reading. But he said, beware of the stories you read or tell, because subtly at night, beneath the waters of consciousness, they are altering your world. And I think that that is very apt at the moment. I want to state up front that storytelling is not always a good thing, nor is it always a bad thing. Storytelling is a way in which humans make sense of their world. And so the use of stories is very much depending on the political intention with which it's used. I mean, quite honestly, politics at the moment seems to be a war of storytelling. Whose story is more believable? How much can they get you to believe their narrative over others? I'm not interested so much in that type of storytelling. Instead, I'd like to show you two projects that try and use public storytelling in a very different way. So I think that we really mustn't shy away from stories because stories hold power. And here you can see another quote by a fantastic author from Africa as well, is just talking about how powerful stories can be when people talk about their own history rather than having governments or other forms of elites tell their stories to them and define the frame in which stories might be told. So in this project, we were particularly interested in listening to stories of migrant women. And this was meant to be a project around inclusion in the city of Durban. So whilst we wanted to understand inclusion in terms of migration and refugees coming into the city, we also knew very much that there are other social processes which shape our worlds. And so we wanted to speak to women who had experience trying to come to the city and make it a place called home. And particularly, I'd like to show the power here of telling stories when you have a chorus of voices. So not just one story, not a story that can easily fit into a box that people expect to hear about other humans. Stories that cut across difference and show how important difference is to accept and acknowledge, but also stories that find some sort of commonality within the telling as well. And so in this project, we spoke to women who came from Uganda, from Nigeria, from Zimbabwe, and importantly, we also spoke to South African women who were coming from the rural outskirts in KZN and coming into the urban environment. So when you do public storytelling, certainly for me, I'm very fortunate to work with a whole group, a team of collaborators who are interested in how stories move in the city. And so here I worked with Mpumi Mtumbeni and Neil Coppin and some incredible women who played the stories of Amina, who came from Somalia, of Anene from Zimbabwe, of Matwala, who came from KwaZulu-Natal, and of Ofra from the DRC. And these stories, this piece of theatre is taken from 30 oral histories. So it is not a piece of theatre that is written by a scriptwriter. It are stories of women who are living with us in the city now, in their own words, and how they wish to share their stories. They tell what it feels like to make the decision when you actually decide to leave what you call home and why. What it's like to journey into a new space and try and be officially recognized by both local and national government. And finally, what it means to keep dreams alive in a city, why people are here, how they're making meaning of that, and the kind of inspirations that keep them, if you want, stepping on. So storytelling can be very powerful when it maintains real stories, stories that are of people who are living with us at the moment, our stories. And it's important because I think particularly for policy, and this was a project that attempted to write directly into local government policy, it reminds us that it's also important when we write policies to listen to people's dreams. What we do with this piece of theatre is we have taken it around the city of Durban and played it in many different spaces. It does not have to be in a theatre. We have taken it to spaces in which participants who we spoke to, who gave their stories, got to see their stories played back and could then start a conversation, discussion to say what they thought about that. Had we got the stories right? What was it like listening to their story next to another story? And also, we've been lucky enough to play it to town and regional planners and a whole group of SALGA officials too, to ask local government, when you hear these stories, what does it make you feel? How does it make you think about the frameworks we're creating in our cities? Now, I want to show another example of this type of storytelling. And this is about a project called Lalela Uwandle, which means listen to the ocean. Right now, South Africa is busy doing marine spatial planning along our coastline using almost identical frameworks as what we're talking about here today, which is urban developmental frameworks. So they are attempting to map this type of policy regime onto a fluid ocean, which really doesn't listen to neat spatial order. And that policy has been fairly exclusive. So again, we wanted to place different stories next to each other and ask, what does it mean if we explore how marine scientists are viewing the oceans and the seas? What does it mean if we explore how fishermen in Durban are viewing the oceans and seas? And what does it mean if we explore how traditional healers are making sense of the oceans and our seas? Many of you would know that the ocean is a deeply spiritual place for many people in South Africa. Indeed, often ancestors are thought of living underneath the ocean as well. So the sea is not just a body of water. It is not just about economics and livelihoods or tourism. It is certainly not just about mining our ocean beds for more resources. It has deep symbolic and spiritual meaning for people living in South Africa. How do those stories end up in our policy frameworks? Now, storytelling of this kind, in which you create a chorus of voices, also has to think about how you create an audience with ears, because listening is not something that always comes naturally. So playing these theatres in the round and then opening a conversation means that some people's stories become a catalyst for other people to share stories. And in this way, it's a far more participatory method where people will stay in conversation with each other. And I think there's a real power in starting to ask ourselves, what does it mean to hear her story and his story and her story and their story and his story in conversation with each other? Not as what's often happening in sort of stakeholder meetings where you're just listening to specific angles with this group, and then you go to another group and hear a specific angle, and you're not dealing with the messiness of hearing these stories in chorus with each other. So to end this part of the presentation, I'm going to quote Arundhati Roy. There's really no such thing as a voiceless. They are only deliberately silenced or preferably unheard stories. And I think this is a challenge to us all. How do we move stories into the urban fabrics in ways which it starts a more sensitive, responsive conversation amongst groups. So to end, I would like to show you just a small video so you get a sense of what it's like to be within one of the performances. Bear with me. If you can't hear it, please someone unmute and do shout, but it should work.
Why did you come here, Kwere Kwere? Did you come here to steal our men?
I feel very sorry for a person who does not have a home.
Running through unfamiliar landscapes and languages. Running through countries that didn't care for us. In the beginning, it was just me. Then there was 12 of us. And then there was 20. And by the time we got to Tanzania, the group had grown to about 40 people. Somebody's waiting for me. I'm also coming that way.
You know, when you come from a landlocked country, you're only used to seeing things like lakes and dams and rivers. But seeing the ocean for the first time, that is something you never forget.
I was amazed by this lot of water that was bubbling and boiling. Water that you could not even tell where it was coming from.
All we heard was that it was easy to get a job there. That South Africa was a land of wealth and possibilities with golden beaches.
First thing I noticed about this place were the cockroaches. Everywhere. Zimbabwe may have many things, but certainly not cockroaches that size. You write it down that cockroaches in Durban need to be attended to as a matter of national importance.
I'm actually quite humbled to sit here and watch these women performing these stories. It's very touching, I must say.
I feel I watched something important or something exceptional because that's what theatre can do. It comes under your skin.
At Home Affairs, they expect a bribe. If you don't have the money, you are of no real use to them.
I get up very early each morning for work and I change outside so as not to wake the other women sleeping. I move like a thief in the night so as not to disturb anyone.
7 of us sharing a 1-bedroom flat, and only 2 people had employment.
People invaded our accommodation and threatened to beat us up.
I walk past the funerals on my way to work. They say their shops were looted. Some were burnt alive in their containers.
The same horrors. The same horrors I had run away from in the first place.
The stories that are being told here, they give me a sign of hope.
I would call my husband, crying, saying that I'm coming home. I can't do this. But somehow I stayed.
No matter how hard things are here in Durban, back at home, they are far worse.
I wish my husband was still alive to see me when I move into my new home. He would have been so proud of me.
Thank you very much. I hope that gives a small taste, just maybe to end, to say that, you know, public storytelling that wants to create alternative narratives, narratives that really show the complexity of what's happening in our urban spaces and how we might build more dignity, really do have to be complex stories. They are not stories only of trauma. They are also stories of humor and love and togetherness with trauma, with pain, and sometimes with lots of exclusion. And it's when we listen to these complex stories and also think about the ethics of sharing these stories that we might really have started a far more productive conversation. Thank you very much. Oh, Oliver, sorry, we can't hear you. Oh, I'm sorry, Oliver. I don't know why your sound's gone. Is it just me? Can other people hear Oliver? No?
No, I think
he's having issues.
It's a bad technology day, Oliver. Sorry.
Well, Frank is the head of the region. I'm not going to hold you to anything, but surely Frank, as the head of the country, the region, should know what his budget is. So that's quite scary. I see him what you're working on currently, and if he doesn't know that you're current, then we've got a problem.
Jeff, sorry, I don't know if you're there. You might have to step in because Oliver's sound is gone.
I am here. I see Oliver has tried to reconnect and I still don't think we can hear you, Oliver. We still can't hear you, Oliver. So I think while we try and sort that out, for purposes of keeping on going, I'll step in as the substitute moderator.
Can you perhaps hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you. You saved me by the skin of my teeth there. Okay, that's perfect. Thanks, Oliver.
File version.
I'm so sorry about that. Had no idea what happened there. But Dr. Kira Owen, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. If there was a sound effect, if this was an actual conference in a room somewhere, I'd ask the audience to give you one hell of a round of applause. But unfortunately, we're not in a conference room. But thank you very, very much for that. Really, really do appreciate it. I want to encourage the audience members to jump into the comments and Q&A box and just drop us questions and comments that you might have for Dr. Owen. But I'm going to start with a question that I have that I picked up as you were presenting to us. And you speak about stories capturing not just the past and the present, but also the aspirations of the future. Stories deep stories of history, of of struggle, of triumph, and all of that. And oftentimes, what I've realized is that stories are the product of the sum total of our past, and a great deal of our past, especially in South Africa. Part of the reason why urban spaces exist the way they do is through conflict. Apartheid can't be described as anything other than conflict. And they often say that the person who gets to tell the story is not the victor of the conflict. Is that the case in South African storytelling? Do you see that most of the stories we hear about our past are told through those who hold social capital and other forms of capital, silences and overpowers other people?
Okay, thanks, Oliver. Oliver, do you mind muting your mic, please? Sorry, I don't know why, but it keeps coming through with it says trial version.
I apologize.
Sure. Yeah, look, I think that's a fantastic question, and it's quite a difficult one to answer because, of course, storytelling takes place in lots of different ways in the country. Dominant stories are often stories in which tell or reinforce images and ways of thinking of those who hold forms of power and privilege. That's true. Although I think South Africa, and here we really have to thank our artists, to be honest, and I use that word really broadly, have been incredible at shifting those narratives, have been making sure that those dominant narratives are not the only ones in the room anymore. So I think South Africa is incredibly exciting in that way. You've got some artists here who are doing that. And I've also put in the chat, if people are interested, to go and look at that methodology, MP Theatre, people that I'm very lucky to partner with, who aren't just wanting to create arts and stories, they are wanting to create stories that push for change. So I think change has already started, and it's not true anymore that it's only the powerful whose stories we're listening to. I think where we need to get a little bit better is we need to start strategizing about how we might start a movement of storytelling in this way, which has a very particular sort of intention to take on some of the stubborn inequalities that we see in this country: racism, sexism, various forms of prejudice. And if we could do that, I think we might move even quicker towards another way of being in this place.
It's interesting that you mention artists. Oftentimes artists are accused of appropriating stories. They're accused of misappropriating stories for the purposes of, financial benefit, profit. And so I'll make an example. Beyonce releasing a massive project talking about African kingdom histories, right? And talking about the story of the Lion King. The backlash she faces is that, no, you're appropriating the stories of Africans. That's one example at a broad global level. We can bring it down to a local level. Early on in his career, Johnny Clegg faced a lot of backlash when he started making Istratamiya music and tuning his guitar to the loose sounds that you hear often in Maskandi music and Istratamiya. And when they realized that, no, this is not a man who tells stories about us from the outside. He's a man that lives with us, amongst us, and the stories is just as much his as it is ours. How do we ensure that stories do not get misappropriated and as a consequence get diluted? How do we fight to own our stories? Artists are one, but are there other methods?
Yeah, I mean, excellent point. I don't want to go too much. This is probably a question you could ask all the panelists at some point. I think these issues are difficult, the issues around cultural appropriation. The storytelling that we use, and we do this for exactly the reason that you're talking about. The first people to see that script, the first people to have a say and comment on it are the participants and sometimes the civil society partners that we're working with. We do that either through table readings. In other words, they first get to tell us, hey, you are not telling the story in a way that we are comfortable with, or you're missing a key aspect here. And why did you highlight this and not that? And this is very important. So this type of script writing has to be iterative, and it has to first be in conversation with the people whose stories it is. And only once we've done that can we move it into the wider public. And then I just want to be clear on this. We are fortunate enough to go and find funding in which we can pay the artists who are acting and some of the script writers to work with us. But we do not charge for any of the performances. And that is a conscious decision because, payment to get in immediately excludes people. And secondly, exactly this thing about appropriation, right? Like to make money off people's stories is ethically very difficult. So this particular process does work to push into policy. So for example, with Lalela Owandle, we had been invited to the United Nations Ocean Conference where there are high up members of state and to perform for them. But unfortunately with COVID, that never happened. As we had a meeting to get into the marine spatial planning. We see it as a type of research intervention, but using creative methodology. I promise you it's far more powerful than when I hand a research report to a local government official or to a national minister and say, please read this, you need to do something. It doesn't go far. But when you get someone to sit in the circle and say, what do you think about this? That starts a very different conversation.
I have a question here from Natim Twetya. And he says, how do we make sure that we aren't preaching to the choir with our storytelling? How do we make sure that these stories get to the right ears? And it leads very well into another point made by Rorisang Sojane, who says, what does being a persuasive storyteller mean? And how do you get planners to start using it in addressing our past? How do we make sure, as Nati says, it gets to the right ears, and that being planners? And how do we make sure that it's persuasive but not preaching to the choir?
Yeah, so that takes a lot of long-term background work. The Last Country project was 3 years, and part of that time, myself and a few others are working to create connections into decision-making spaces. Doesn't happen fast, but sometimes when it opens, it can be very exciting. And sometimes you have to be quite opportunistic. So for example, I got asked to come and give another colleague could not do a keynote talk to the South African Local Government Association, SALGA. So they asked whether I could step in. And then I contacted the organizers and said, instead of me doing a talk, because you're going to give me 1 hour, I will pay to bus all of your officials to a theater and they can listen to a piece of theater for 1 hour. Would you be willing to take a chance? And luckily that person said yes, which meant that 70 government officials sat and listened to The Last Country and then started speaking about how it made them start to feel about their work and some of the things that they had forgotten. I've had quite a senior planning official say to me, you know, when Matwala bought out that house that she's building for herself in the rural area, immediately I go into planning mode. I said, the density is wrong, the materials are not allowed. And I had to stop myself and realize that I'm talking about somebody else's dream that they have worked towards for their entire life. So I think that, there's moments where it does seem to make some shifts.
That's amazing.
There's so many questions. I'm going to do my best to answer them in the chat, but my apologies, I do have to leave at 10 to 1 just to teach a class online. So I'm very sorry if I don't get to answer all of them.
No, we'll use some of those questions a little later on in the session. So we can wrap it here. And I do want to say thank you so much, Dr. Kira Owen. Your time really appreciated. Beautiful presentation. And beautiful answers to the questions. Thank you so much for joining us today. For those who'd like to follow your work and read more about the theater production that we just saw that you played for us in the presentation, where can they find you? Where can they follow your work?
I have put in the chat the link to MP Theatre, who's the collective that I work with, and you can have a look at a few of the different projects we've been working on, and then I'll try and answer some of the questions, and I'll put my email in the chat.
Thank you so much. Really do appreciate it.
Thanks very much.
Thanks. That was Dr. Kira Owen. Click on those links and follow her work. Amazing stuff they're doing. Really beautiful play. I had goosebumps just watching that short clip from that play and listening to some of the reflections from some of the audience members over there. But it's change makers like the people a part of that play that really will be shaping what the civic, how the civic sees themselves, how they're empowered, but more importantly, what our urban spaces will be looking like. And we're going to be having a conversation right now with a group of change makers in a panel discussion. And I'll introduce them a little in a short while. But before I do it, there's a video that I want us to watch. And while you watch that video, I want your reactions to it. Type into the Q&A box one word. And the word should be how it made you feel. How it made you feel, what's the first thing that came to mind, or what it made you think about. Type in that one word for me as you watch that video. Sean, take it away.
Level 7. Empowered active communities. Cities cannot succeed without the energy and investment of its citizens. The very power of cities stems from their unique capacity to bring people of diverse social and cultural backgrounds together. Empowered and active communities enable cities to succeed and transform the quality of urban life and result in socially integrated, stable, safe and just societies where all human rights are protected and each individual's dignity is respected.
Sorry, that was unfortunately the wrong video. That's the video we saw at the opening. And perhaps I'll ask our technical team, Sean and Jokuru, to locate the video that we did want to play for you here. It's a video of change makers just sharing their stories and their work in the various communities across the country that they're working in. And can you perhaps indicate to us, Sean or Jokuru, if you do have that video for us?
I'm sorry, Oliver, Jeff has it.
Jeff, can you go ahead and play it for us?
Hi, my name is Katumumba. I'm actually from Limpopo. I spent most of my years in Pretoria. And
hi, Sanmara Nonke, Kamalabo Bafana, Wagakpega, from Ekatahong in Strand, born and battered at East Rand.
My name is Malibone Tibiso Todetsi, currently an unemployed graduate town planner from Standerton, a small town in Mpumalanga just along the banks of the Vaal River. Born and raised there and currently residing there.
Sanbonani Kamala Monontlanta, and I was born and raised in the Eastern Cape, Boskesazana. Stuxbridge, actually. That has shaped me to become independent, that has shaped me to move the world around me, that has shaped me to become a beautiful cook, a healer, and also very, very confident about my spaces and who I am.
My name is Sean. I grew up in the most amazing city in the world called Jozi, Johannesburg. I'm an inner city kid. I've lived in the inner city and surrounds, and I just love this city of mine. I've got resilience, just like the city. And the vibrancy of the city and the people that I meet every day, yeah, it really keeps me going.
My name is Rorisang Sejang. The city of Johannesburg has made me a hybrid, enabling me to engage differently in many spaces and becoming a well-rounded Johannesburgian.
Hi, my name is Mtu. Grew up in Mpumalanga, Komazi. Actually, I wanted to explore more, learn different ways of doing things, and know what's happening out there.
My name is Kumambambo, and I grew up in Mbangeni in KwaZulu-Natal in a small township called Engwelezane.
Good day, my name is Mpulelo Mtimbu, and I am the director of Pista Ventures, a research and design practice that sits at the intersection of design, cultural intelligence, and technology.
My name is Tamlin David, and I'm a project manager for the Mandela Bay Development Agency. Originally, I'm from the small town of Graaff-Reinet. I grew up valuing and appreciating close community bonds and traditional values, hard work, resilience, and creativity.
I'm a blogger, and I run a blog page called Urban Abstracts. It has a YouTube extension called Chronicles of a Young Town Planner. And in these platforms, I really hope to give young planners like myself a chance to gather their thoughts around the various topics that make up the work that we do. It's a way of, validating young voices in the planning space and influence the right decision makers, to make those small changes that we need to see to realize the bigger changes that we want to see in our cities and in the world.
The Culture Capital Youth Festival seeks to address that, seeks to infect the city with culture, with all cultures. It gives opportunities for the creatives to look at the city as a big white canvas that we can paint on, and that can reflect also us as societies and as part of the city.
I am a founder of IGB, which is Intelligent Girls and Boys. What we are doing as intelligent boys and girls, we are advocating for early childhood, parenting, and teenage pregnancy. What motivated me to do this? It's because I've seen the gap in the community that I'm from, that most girls get pregnant. After getting pregnant, they cannot go back to school, or rather they don't want to go back to school because they had a burden to go work for their kids, and in most cases it hits girls. And then you see boys who becoming frustrated because of that, then they tend to do drugs, then their lives become miserable.
The project's initiative is research and development, mostly in the area of RPA, that's robotic process automation.
And together we make up just some of the first urban change makers that are the Troyville House residents.
My initiative is the Troyville House, and my role in this is just to bring people here and cultivate the space.
I want to change the way people look at food. I want to change the way we eat. I want to change the way we look at the earth around us. I want to also change how we interact with ourselves.
We're working very closely with SACN on a project called Open Oceans, which is an exploration of our ocean and its waterways. It is a digital platform curated by a community and ecosystem of adventurers, technologists, scientists, creatives, and writers. And it is dedicated to the dialogue on sustainability. So what the culmination of this will involve aspects of citizen science using some drone photography and image processing to really sort of cast people to a broader height in terms of viewing the conversation on circularity. And we're looking forward to really showcasing our project later on this year. And thoroughly excited.
I manage projects within Port Elizabeth, which really aim to create spaces that transform and inspire our local communities.
My initiative is called bucket farming, which is basically farming or growing food using buckets instead of land. I chose buckets because it is just easier to maintain and easier to replicate whether one has access to land or not.
I've decided to do this initiative through the motivation of my mentor. I wanted to help. I wanted to bring back to the community.
The biggest support we received was from the Nelson Mandela Bay artists. The artist community in this city is quite amazing. The talent is exceptional, and just the pure resilience in pulling something like that off. Outstanding.
The greatest support has been the people around me. I think my passion has always led me to the right people and the right spaces.
I'm lucky to have people that I consider mentors around me that always just, give me that affirmation that this is important work. But besides that, the audience that always receives the work, my reach has now, I have people in India, the Netherlands, America that, read my blogs every time I release it. I have a young South African population, most importantly, that engages with the blogs, that engages with the YouTube content.
The greatest support of the development has really been the vibrant public participation. A wealth of suggestions and creative ideas have really been provided that enable us to get a clear understanding of what is desired by the local community.
Greatest support our initiative has received is partnership.
My greatest support to achieving this initiative would have to be the South African Cities Network for actually funding the initiative. The funds enabled me to reach more people and also share the idea with many. I also got support from local NPOs and community libraries in identifying the beneficiaries and stakeholders. And also a crucial aspect would be the group of young people I worked with in making this initiative come to reality.
I find that area being more vital in the current era that we actually living in, and the kinds of problems that actually need the kind of adaptability that the system is actually missing. A lot of industry shifts are there already, but with collaboration and systems being able to integrate and being able to function as one, I think we can achieve great things even during the pandemic.
Our greatest obstacle, just as any other organization, is receiving funding for our work. We have many great partners and initiatives which require much more funding to promulgate our work towards creating a well-being economy in which everyone be able to live a good life.
The greatest obstacle has definitely been really realizing the true value of this work. So starting and keeping going has been a bit challenging for me because I tend to invalidate the value of this work that I do.
The greatest obstacle was having to convince people that growing food in buckets would actually work. I got to learn that introducing a new concept requires patience, clear communication of the bigger picture, and just also putting yourself in the shoes of those you are trying to help.
Money, budget to actually be able to implement projects such as these.
I think finance has been an obstacle, and COVID.
The consumption of culture escalated during COVID-19 because we all found comfort in films and books and in digital content. So our consumption escalated, and I think I recognize that, I see that. And for us in the city, we take pride in the artists that we work with. So the biggest challenge for us, I think it has got to be the regulations that came with COVID-19 and just how vague those regulations were when it had to impact on culture and arts and heritage.
Thank you very much to all our urban change makers who you saw in that video doing amazing work across the country. We're going to be in a panel discussion right now with a group of urban change makers as well. But having watched that video, what's the one feeling, what's the one idea, what's the one thought that came to mind for you? Do let us know in the chat box or in the Q&A box. And we'll read a few of them as we progress with the rest of the program. But introducing to you right now our panel, we will be joined by Lerato Marole, who is from Slovo Park, which is an informal settlement in Johannesburg. Lerato is currently the deputy chairperson at Slovo Park Community Development Forum. Lerato also served as on the Nansfield Business Forum in 2014 and was also the National Secretary for Informal Settlements Network until last year. Lerato is also the founder of the Slovo Arts Group. We'll be joined by Oyama Vanto from Port Elizabeth. And Oyama is a record label owner and a cultural manager, works in cultural management that creates street performances to enable cultural expression. Oyama engages in cultural policy discussions of the municipality. We'll also be joined by Simon Sizwe Mason, who is an aspiring change maker, who's the co-founder of Makers Valley in Johannesburg. Simon Sizwe Mason is currently a PhD candidate at Wits School of Governance, working in this space. Thank you so much for joining us, Lerato, Oyama, and Simon. Really, really do appreciate your time this afternoon. Lerato, I want to start with you in this session, and then I want Oyama and Simon to also reflect on this particular question. As a change maker, when you started out in your work, and do tell us what your work is and what your organization focuses on, what was the biggest obstacle? As you heard in the video we just watched, towards the end of it, when those change makers reflected on their work and listed some of the biggest obstacles they faced. Some spoke about COVID being an obstacle. Some spoke about finances being the obstacle. If you could start all over and do this again, what would you do differently to address the obstacles that are your biggest obstacles, and what are those? Lerato? Lerato, are you with us? Oh, it seems we may have lost Lerato over there. We'll start, let's see if we have Oyama. Oyama, are you with us?
Yes, sir. Yes, I am.
Great. That same question directed to you. What are your biggest obstacles that you in the line of work that you do, and what exactly is the line of work you do? I know you own a record label and work in cultural management to give a platform to people to express themselves. But if you could start all over again, what is it that you would do different to address some of the obstacles that you've had?
Thanks. That is a very easy, difficult question you're asking. maybe I will put a bit of a context on my work at the MBDA. When I came at the MBDA around 2014-15, I came right at the time where there were many defacing of colonial monuments at the time. And so one of my key responsibilities within the MBDA was then to restore those monuments. I come from the Pondoland, and there's a very strong history I carry with me, which represents who I am as a person in the Eastern Cape. So I get to the MBDA, and the first project assigned that to me is the restoration of colonial sculptures and monuments. That was very hard at first, because I felt that all cities, I think, our landscape in the inner cities is still very one-sided storyline, still very a colonial landscape. So my first approach at the MBA, I then thought, look, I have to find a space where I create a dialogue and a conversation, right? So I created a series of public monuments and sculptures in the inner city as a conversation piece between our current our status quo in the city and what the entire society feels that we are in the inner city. There's a bit of an exclusion about who we are as the people. So for me, my biggest obstacle and challenge is that by the very make, all cities have got this very fixed history that is so protected, but it rides at the backbone of oppression, of forced removals. So our idea was like, we have to play a significant role in transformation. And so we have to create a space where we use arts, culture, and heritage to create those interesting conversations that I feel as the cities, all cities, we are still not at the level where we want to sit down and engage. And for me, I still feel, even though everything is happening outside of the country at this present moment in time, in terms of the removals of the monuments, that conversation is still there. It is still a valid talk, in the sense that if you want to create a space which is a reflection of who we are, all of us in society, we have to begin with creating a storyline that is open to all heritages and all people. So for me, my biggest obstacle and my biggest opportunity as well is that my city is fixed in one linear storyline. My responsibility as a person of culture, I have to expand on that and tell other stories and create a conversation. So even though my city is fixed into one storyline, I have a responsibility in unpacking all other stories. And for me, our culture and our heritage is specifically hidden in the artists. So for me, I've managed to find a way of tapping into the artists, the filmmakers, actors, etc. So for me, I think those are the people that we must find a way of unpacking all of us of our history and our heritage. So within the MBDA, we found a way of now using arts and culture and heritage in unpacking a whole range of other stories that we are not telling, and that our city cannot be just one linear storyline, and without informing what other cultures and heritages within this whole big city. So in the long and short, it's an obstacle, but for me, I also see it as an opportunity that our city is a wide space where we can find ways of painting and unpacking all kinds of histories and storylines, which are a reflection of who we all are in society.
In the comment section, Rihanna says, this makes her feel hopeful. And Geshi says, this makes her feel inspired. This is amazing work. Simon, I'm gonna bring you in here, and I want you to address exactly the same thing for me here. And do talk to us about your organization, Makers Valley. What do you guys do? But also, what are the major obstacles that you guys face? And if you could start all over, what would you do different? Simon?
Thanks, Oliver. So yeah, I mean, very interesting. I also wanted to just reflect what Oyama was saying. And I'm sitting here in a very regal colonial chair in a kind of old heritage mansion, the Troyville House. I started with the Makers Valley project when I started my action research PhD and joined a collective of artists and creatives and property owners in the inner city of Joburg and the east side of the inner city. And I think what was interesting is that I had a very clear vision myself that didn't always match other people's vision. And when I tried to push that vision of my own, it didn't always balance out with others. And I think I learned even before this project, but for the difficulties of holding one's own idea of what is right in a situation and compromising across a range of other ideas of what is right as different change makers, whether the change maker be a property developer that is intent on improving the area in the way they see a good area being, or whether it be somebody that is currently jobless or not able to earn an income and is very focused on remedying that. And I think sort of fixing in my own idea of what is right into all of that has been one of the biggest learning opportunities that I've had, and also sometimes the biggest personal obstacle because of how I feel things should be versus how the compromised or the middle way actually should be. So I think that with regard to storytelling and the power of storytelling, giving space to those stories has been one of my biggest opportunities for learning. I think what's just on basically just a quick, what we have done here. So we started something called Makers Valley Partnership. The idea is that there are lots of makers, people that are good with their hands, people that are change makers in many ways in the neighborhood, and to form a partnership between businesses using certain businesses like Victoria Yards that are new developments and ensuring that they are assets for the neighborhood as opposed to just being tools for displacement, which is often the case with gentrification. And I think that what we've seen is a really amazing growth in people's agency and people's ability to run their own projects, and tangible change that has come as a result of that, a lot around the social and creative enterprise space. On my own kind of journey with social enterprise, I started with changemaker houses or changemaker residences in 2015 with the start of that one. All around Joburg, basically, one in Brixton, then Bays Valley, then Bertram's, and now here in Troyville. And the idea is that it's a space for changemakers or urban changemakers to live and carry out their work, not necessarily in partnership with each other, but in support of each other, and have it as a space for other people, other changemakers to come and immerse themselves for shorter periods of time. So it's an intentional community of urban changemakers, essentially. And I'm here at the Troyville House. We've just moved in September, and we're trying to have that kind of middle way of a certain vision towards a well-being economy, towards an economy that is supporting social and creative enterprise rather than supporting only profit. We're running the house as a company that is a social enterprise that will be offering more opportunities for shareholders to come on board as not only part of the space and living in the space, but owning the space as well. And we're just getting started, and we're very open to people's stories coming in and visions coming into the space and doing what they want to do in the space. So we're offering the space for free for events or otherwise up until the end of this year and potentially into next year. So do get in touch. I'll also post I'm not sure if I have the opportunity later to post it, but I'll post it now, the website for the Troyville House, and get in touch with me as well.
That's amazing. Definitely do post that information and link if possible in the comment box below. Lerato, do we have you?
Yeah, thank you, Chief. Sorry about that. Can you allow me to at least not video myself, because I see I'm getting a challenge once I activate a video. So if you'd allow me to do that.
No, that's not no. Go ahead.
Yeah. Basically, it's like the first speaker said, it's a easy and tough question to answer. But one would say, going back, had I had an opportunity to change or the way I'm doing things or the journey that I've walked, basically I would have taken a different direction, in a sense that my specific focus was the needy, myself being one of them, in a sense of people with no shelter, people that need assurance of tenure. So the directive that I would have taken, I would have at least influenced young people from informal settlements per se, from a government point of view, to say, one, let's have young people that would be influencers of policy change. For instance, in a sense where we would be saying, we educate or identify young people that would play an integral role because they've got a background of informality that would basically have an influence in changing how we implement our policies or how we basically think of the informality around every city, of course. Because one, you would realize that the informal settlements have so much majority of people that are playing an integral role economically, of course. Although it might not be seen because we are not utilizing it in a correct manner. As much as there's so much of them, it means economy of the country much at most depend on their day-to-day activities because they live for survival. So eradicating some of the elements in us trying to address the informal people, because I always regard even people that are renting as informal people because they don't have security of tenure. So mine would have been a change or shift in that, saying let's shift from us trying to do away with informalities, or for that matter, try to find balance in formalizing the status quo, in a sense that how does one play a role in our economy in a space where he is? How do we then come in and assist so that we grow that particular individual for the betterment of our country and our economy? Because everyone in this country has got a role to play in making sure that our economy grows. And when you go to informal settlements, at most, almost every business would be run by people from outside. Those that are very few are from locals. It's not xenophobic, but are we investing back into the economy as per tax and all that, in saying we are growing the economy? So this kind of opportunities, township economy opportunities, must be then brought to those that are of needy, in a sense that they would then find the expression in developing themselves and also change everything. One element that I would have also wanted to change is the thinking that every other person that is residing in an informal settlement is purely there because he's waiting for a house from government. I always take a view that people are waiting for an opportunity to get better. In a sense, you go to most informal settlements, you would find that 60% of those people residing there have already built their own structures in the way they want to. how are we doing in trying to come up with opportunities that would change the status quo in those particular places. So, in a sense, how many young people from informal settlement that does not have electricity, that does not have any other source of, for instance, Wi-Fi's and all other elements, how many young people that comes from the that would get opportunities similar to those that are in formal townships? At most, one would be saying they are lazy, but not looking at the challenges that they are currently facing. So these are some of the challenges that one would have eradicated in saying, let me deal with this so that I create the next layer of people that would not specifically be dependent on government, but be independent. So if we are not dealing with young people now residing in informal settlements, it means we would have the next generation also erecting an informal settlements elsewhere, because opportunities are not coming falsely, or services for that matter, for one to grab a opportunity that comes along, are not coming forth to them. Hence, would always forever not be in a position to eradicate the challenges. Two is that one would have thought of rural business development. Remember, most people in informal settlements comes from different provinces or different countries for that matter, looking for opportunities. Had we been in a position to start developing economies outside
Lerato, do we still have you? I think we may have lost Lerato there. Network or audio just disappeared there. But once we have Lerato back, we will continue that last bit there, which is really important. And oh, we do have you back. Do you mind just finishing us over there? We lost you for a minute.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I think there was a call coming in, but then I'm trying to get to a point where I'm saying, from my point of view, we would not deal with informal settlement from a direction that we are dealing with now, in a sense of trying to formalize them or eradicate them for that matter, but creating opportunities from all around the country for people to grow, whether it's business-wise, whether it's employment opportunities or school opportunities coming forth from where people are. It would have a situation where an influx of people coming from rurals and other countries derail a bit and comes down. In that note, Chief, I thank you.
Thank you so much, Lerato. Really do appreciate that. If you have any questions for any of our panelists or comments that you'd like to make as you were listening to them, do let us know in the Q&A box, or you could do so on Twitter. It is #UrbanFest2020, or you can use the hashtag #UrbanOctober to be a part of the global movement of urban conversations during this month of October. You can also tag us on Twitter @SA Cities Network. And we will be able to see your tweets, your Instagram posts, on Facebook, whatever the case may be. But the most convenient would be the Q&A box. Do jump in there and type out the questions that you may have for our panelists. I want to pose the first question before I go into the question and answer box to see what other people are asking and saying. I want to bring you in here, Oyama, and have you answer this question for me. I want to focus on participation. When it comes to cultural expression, everybody has a story to express. Everybody wants to participate in the consumption and the production of culture. How have you mobilized people to participate? And has there been an obstacle in getting people to participate? If they don't, what do they give excuses? What are those excuses oftentimes, and how do you think we should address them? Or has it been really easy to get people to participate in your programs?
Look, from my experience here at the MBDA is that you don't have to look for culture. You don't have to look for art. It exists. It's there. What I think all cities have lacked to do is to use that, because it is there. All communities have it. All communities have a jazz history, theater history, music history, political history. All of these things are already there in place. And so for us, what we've done well within the MBD, I think we take pride in the engagement. And you don't start an engagement and with a date, a start date and an end date. I think we understand it well that when you are in the community, you literally have to be part of the community. And that stuff, it doesn't stop. You engage, you then find ways of bringing up everything which is there in the different areas in the area where you are working in. So our challenge in the city has been, it has not been finding the artists and bringing them in the discussion. Because for me, I feel that's where it starts. You must bring people into the conversation. For another point, in the creative sector, the majority of people that are in the sector is the youth. It's the youth that we put in all of our statements as a rhetoric, I feel. But we are not engaging in that sector. The majority of young people are in the creative space. So if you want to find ways of addressing high rates of unemployment, there's a sector there that has got two things it's doing well. I feel the artists of the time, they're like a time capsule. So if you want to know more about a country, you look at the music, you look at the film, you look at the film, at the music, at the theaters, you look at the books. All of that cultural content, it tells you about who the people and societies are. So for me, I find it very weird that that stuff that we feel is a gel that brings us all together. And if you remember now, under COVID-19, it's the artists that pulled us out. It's the artists who made us forget about the whole burden of COVID-19. They pulled us out. They are the significant group of people that I feel we are not using. So for us in the city, it is not a matter of we can't find them and work with them. They are already there. What we lack is a cultural policy that integrates all of our efforts. All of us are punching in different directions. Up until we integrate, we narrow our focus to harden our blow. We are all hitting, but I think if we can just narrow our focus and have a very strong a cultural policy which binds and links with local municipality as well, we have a winning formula. So we already have a buzzing city with a lot of creatives. Here in the city at this point in time, there used to be one film school within NMU, and Nelson Mandela University. So over the course of 3, 4, 5 years, there's AFDAs in town in the inner city. There's new film schools. There's a whole group of young people waiting to unpack and tell these stories, right? In film, in theater. So we haven't managed to find a way of utilizing that. So for me, I feel it's there. All we have to do is engage with it and stick to that and not come in and then leave. When you're part of development, you must learn the culture that you form part of society at all times.
Simon, I want to bring you in. Oyama tells us that we need to integrate all of our efforts through some sort of policy effort, because we're all punching in different directions. You're in the Wits School of Governance, where policy is a discussion that this is a part of all the conversations that happen there, so to speak. How do we do that? How do we achieve that?
So I'm funded by the Wits School of Governance, but I'm actually in the Wits School of Architecture and Planning. But we still have a lot of policy discussions there, and I continue that in my thesis. I think basically my feeling around policy in general is that quite often we see, I mean, it's age old, you know, right from my undergrad years, people were very clear about the disconnect between policy and implementation, policy that is contextually inappropriate for implementation in South African context, or the capacity of people to actually implement policy And I love that this conversation is about change makers, because I really think that policy in South Africa in many fields has actually been relatively okay since the post-apartheid years. And quite often the rhetoric around it has largely remained similar, whether it be changing from sustainability rhetoric to resilience rhetoric, or whether it be from whatever. So, and I think that quite often that needs to be moved or built upon in the implementation. And I'm really excited that, you know, we saw the amazing selection of change makers and young change makers that are actually trying to implement with, and I often come across people that are unconcerned around what the policy is saying, unconcerned that there is, to be honest, an IUDF or an IDF in any, or a UDF in any area, and where that isn't what is the lever of change. What is the lever of change is where people are taking the next step and integrating that policy into their work. I think inappropriate change making is very dangerous if it's uninformed, or, you know, if the policy is not, if people are trying to do things without being well informed in how to do it. But at the same time, my experience and my research shows that where things fall short is with the change making itself. And I'm hoping that what we see is more people that are better resourced and more skilled. Not, I see so many often white people who have left government, maybe because of frustrations there, or have left the change-making space to go into, which there is a component of change-making there, but it's not tangible change, to go into consulting, writing policy for government, or to go into academia sometimes, or advisory work. And all of these are important, but I think that we really need the people to stay or to join the real change makers, whether it be in government or starting one's own social enterprise, or starting a business that is ethically sound, or joining an NGO and making sure that they're not just doing training work, but actually doing the work, whether it be offering accommodation or whether it be offering schooling, whatever it is. And I wanted to also concur with, you know, creatives. Although I'm not a creative, I am creative, but I'm not an artist or a dancer or anything. And yet I work with a lot of creatives, and that really is where the energy is. I mean, it's incredible what we're seeing in Makers Valley. We're trying it for the space to be Josie's heart of social and creative enterprise. And we're trying to harness that energy with the creatives towards the greater good. And to also allow that creative energy to also be a way for people to sustain themselves and build a livelihood. So I think that I agree with regard to the fourth industrial revolution, growing unemployment globally. We do see the creative space growing as one of the few spaces that is seeing growth, and the growth of energy as well as the growth of, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. We're really, really pressed for time, because I do want Ninja to come in and show us her artistic work, what she's captured throughout the conversations we've had. But before I do, Lerato, I do want you to answer this one question for me. It's a question from Temba. Temba says, what can we encourage the average South African to do to contribute to these kinds of initiatives? Some people may not be or feel capacitated or be able to start something like this, but they may want to get involved to contribute somehow. And you also then ask, is financial contribution the best option for those who can? But importantly, Lerato, what can we do to encourage the average South African to get involved?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Chair. I think people are well encouraged. Let's make an example. For an informal settlement residing person, just an elderly, to go to a clinic, he has to walk somewhere around 10 to 15 kilos, 20 kilos to get service. So I'm saying the services that are offered, there are good services that are there for all the people, but they are a bit far from those that are needy. And if we were to bring most of those services nearer to individuals that are struggling, we would have a situation where we must be in a position, we would be in a position to participate and also play a part, in a sense that where I'm residing, for a young person to go to apply for a loan for a business, he has to travel for so much long time with so much resources that would be required that one does not have. So these are some of the elements that would be creating a situation where people look like they are not interested, but because of situation, they can't get to the bottom end of whatever they are thinking or whatever they have planned. So bringing closer the opportunities would then create enthusiasm within every other person that is around to start participating and engaging and seeing the opportunities that are around them to start doing that. Let's make an example. Here in Slovo Park, we've got a team of people that would specifically deal with matriculants that would have to apply for the following year for bursaries and other elements. That has to come from other people's pockets for them to be assisted. We have young people that would want to participate in business. You would have to take this young person through that particular journey, and it's costly. No, so having these opportunities closer to those that are of need for real, really an impact would be made for people to start playing a role and liberating themselves from the situation they find themselves in. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. Really, really do appreciate it. That's a really, really beautiful answer. And thank you so much to all our panelists, Simon, as well as Oyama and Lerato. Really, really do appreciate it. I will put their details in the chat box for those of you who'd like to follow their work, get in touch with them, collaborate perhaps, whatever the case may be. I will make their details available, or I'll ask Sean to make it available in the chat box for us over there. But at this moment, I'd like to bring in Ninja, who is a visual artist. Ninja, throughout the conversation, from the start of the session, listened to us really closely having these conversations, listened to your comments and questions, read some of them, and captured it in artistic expression. So really, a picture speaks 1,000 words. Ninja, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for this wonderful session today. So I've been capturing the images using some pastels, some oil pastels, and then I've been using some paint. Just at the beginning of our session, there was a conversation about the segregated South Africa. And if we look at South Africa in a basic diagram, and this would be, the people in their settlements, and especially taking Port Elizabeth as an urban study, where there was this industrial belt that was built to separate the prosperous city versus the people who actually would be, making the city prosperous. And this is basically, there's big segregation lines, highways, physical barriers, and in terms of a simplified form, we get this with South Africa. There's big, bold physical barrier separating people from one another. But the one thing that was really interesting in today's session was that people come with stories. So then this illustration came where we all have our stories and we feed these urban spaces, these built spaces. And while Dr. Kira was presenting her, her project, and I loved these women with the suitcases, and those many suitcases that carries life, carries everything that they ever earned. They go to cities from different places in Africa. They come to South Africa thinking it's a prosperous place, and come with the challenges that comes with being in South Africa. And also this is a fun graphic where if we imagine the city as a set of suitcases and stories and storybooks, and we gather them together under a tree, because a tree is something that protects, nurtures, shelters. And the other thing that was very powerful is the meaning of the ocean. And the meaning of the ocean, there's the little people, and they all are different colors because they come from different places. And the meaning of the ocean is different for everyone. And this is something that we as individuals in South Africa need to really understand, that we all come from different backgrounds, we all have different perception, and we have to be more understanding of each other context in that way. And what Lerato was talking about, before I go to the final visual, what Lerato was talking about was very interesting, where if we provide a city where, you know, it's nurturing its people, our future generation, there's a mother handing over a baby to the landscape of South Africa. And I like to represent South Africa as a hand. It's a hand that holds, it's the land, it holds us, you know, and there's the city. And if we don't make sure that it has like basic stuff like human rights, basic services, dignity, education, safety, sustainability, care, love, jobs, how do we ensure that our future generation is able to, you know, lift the country, lift everything from a drowning country? So the other thing that I think that is something that's so powerful about South Africa is people's cultures and people's stories, people's heritage. And wherever we all come from, we have this, I'll show you the previous image first, which is a bit more descriptive. So everyone comes from a different road, a different journey. We all riding this journey, and they're all different colors, you know, all different places. So, but we're going towards, we need to go towards the same thing, which is this lightness. We were looking for light. And if we are working together, and I chose like to put these people in a circle, because a circle is like represent, you know, when people gather, they gather in a circle, and fire is something so powerful. We all gather around a fire. It's like human instinct to just stand around a fire. And there's this fire, this fire that South Africa is holding. And there's the people protecting this fire. And this is the city, and obviously South Africa, the land represented as a tree. So this was basically my visuals for today, and I really enjoyed everyone's conversation. I hope this was great for you guys.
Those are all really, really, really beautiful. Thank you so much, Ninja, for that. Really, really do appreciate it. And thank you very much to everyone else who was a part of this session. We went over time by 5 minutes, so I apologize to everyone for running a little bit over time, but really, really thank you. If you are interested in what's happening later today at Urban Fest 2020, there is an amazing panel discussion happening later on, hosted by Noni Kumalo. And it is a panel discussion about reimagining public opinion and satire, and an organization that I am a part of, Politically Aware, will be on that panel discussing what we're doing in the world of satire to give life to public opinion and really get people to be interested in public opinion through various tools. And satire can be an amazing tool to get that happening. Tasha Hendricks will be performing a live music piece in that particular session, taking place at 4:30 this afternoon. And you can find the link to that particular session anywhere on our social media platforms, hashtag UrbanFest 2020 at SA Cities Network. And you can find the link to that Zoom session later on. Thank you very much to everyone who was a part of this. Really, really do appreciate it. And enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you so much.